Hello, all you freedom-loving people. Welcome to another episode of Front Page. I'm your host, Scott Cameron Goulet. Damage to the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines appears to be the result of an attack. Regardless of the cause, the results are a disaster for the environment and will surely affect winter heating in Europe. Facebook recently deleted 2 accounts being operated by the CCP that appear to have been attempting to influence the midterms. A week ago, leaders traveled to London to attend the state funeral of Queen Elizabeth II, and on Tuesday, dignitaries headed to the other side of the world to attend the state funeral of former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. From Iran to China, totalitarian governments are on their way to collapse. In the new era, these evil regimes will not exist. It's been an uphill road, but one worth climbing. Okay, let's get into it. Damage to Nord Stream 1 and 2, the gas pipeline from Russia to Germany, occurred on the same day, resulting in an unexplained gas leak. Seismologists in Denmark and Sweden also detected powerful underwater explosions. Germany, Denmark, Poland, and other countries suspect that the pipelines were sabotaged. Nord Stream 1 stopped delivering natural gas to Europe in August, and Nord Stream 2 pipeline is not yet operational, but both pipelines contain pressurized natural gas. Videos released by the Danish military on Tuesday, September 27th, showed huge bubble circles forming in the Baltic Sea, with the largest one being more than 1 kilometer in diameter. The Swedish Maritime Administration said on the same day that Nord Stream 1 was found to have 2 leaks in Swedish and Danish waters. Both pipelines are located in the northeast of the Danish island Bornholm. The operator of the Nord Stream pipeline said that the leakage of 3 lines of the offshore gas pipeline is unprecedented. Outside analysis of the possible causes include technical failures and possibly even sabotage. Seismologists in Denmark and Sweden also said that they monitored 2 strong explosions on Monday when the leaks occurred. Leaders in Poland, Sweden, and Denmark also agreed that the leak was clearly the result of a deliberate action, but no evidence was cited. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said on Tuesday,
"The leaks are under investigation. There are initial reports indicating that this may be the result of an attack or some kind of sabotage, but these are initial reports and we haven't confirmed that yet. But if it is confirmed, that's clearly in no one's interest."
Analysts say that the investigation will take a long time because it will involve submarines probing the seabed where the pipeline was laid. However, whatever the findings, and regardless of the political developments in the war in Ukraine, it's certain that neither pipeline will be able to deliver any gas to the EU in the coming winter. President Trump's response was, U.S. leadership should remain cool, calm, and dry on the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines. This is a big event that should not entail a big solution, at least not yet. The Russia-Ukraine catastrophe should never have happened, and it would definitely not have happened if I were president. Do not make matters worse with the pipeline blowup. Be strategic, be smart, brilliant. Get a negotiated deal done now. Both sides need and want it. The entire world is at stake. I will head up groups. Japan held a state funeral on Tuesday, September 27th, for former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. He was one of the most influential leaders in modern Japanese history who was unfortunately assassinated in July of this year. Hundreds of foreign dignitaries attended the ceremony in Tokyo. This reflects the popularity of Abe at home and overseas during his lifetime. The international community, especially democratic countries, praised Abe's spirit of cooperation and friendship. Shinzo Abe has said that these countries should work together to address common challenges. The Japanese government said that some 4,300 guests attended the state funeral. This included 3,600 from Japan's political and business communities and 700 foreigners from 118 countries, regions, and international organizations. Indian Prime Minister Modi did not attend the Queen's funeral, but he flew to Tokyo in order to pay his respects to Shinzo Abe. It's interesting to note that during the state funeral ceremony, when Taiwan's representative laid flowers and offered condolences, the Master of Ceremonies then signed up with Taiwan in order to express his recognition of Taiwan's international status. This is the first state funeral for a former prime minister in Japan in 55 years since the funeral of Prime Minister Yoshida in 1967. Japan usually holds a state funeral only for the emperor and his family. Shinzo Abe was Japan's longest-serving prime minister, and arguably no other leader has had such an impact on Japan's standing in the world after the war. Shinzo Abe had led Japan through a complex and historic moment. He brought relative political stability to Japan, but he also raised the country's defense spending. He expanded the role that is played by the armed forces, and he extended Japan's alliance with the United States. Regional cooperation in order to ensure freedom and openness in the Indo-Pacific region would not be as mature as it is today if it were not for Abe's ongoing efforts to coordinate it. Many have heard that Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old Iranian Kurdish woman, was arrested. She died for not wearing a headscarf. The Iranian government has been condemned by the international community following successive protests across the country. Last week, Iran's moral police detained Amini for not properly covering her hair with a hijab. This is a mandatory requirement for Iranian women. Amini died 3 days later. There are reports that she was tortured and that she was in a coma for 3 days before she died. Protesters took to the streets to express their discontent with the dictatorship, and it turned into the largest anti-government protest in Iran in the past 20 years. Demonstrations took place in more than 40 cities across the country, from Kurdistan in the northwest to the capital, Tehran. Protesters are demanding an end to violence and discrimination against women, as well as an end to the mandatory wearing of the hijab. For days, protesters have raised calls for an end to the Islamic Republic's rule, chanting slogans such as "Go away, mullahs," "We don't want the Islamic Republic," and "Death to the supreme leader." As many as 35 people, possibly many more, have been killed in the clashes with security forces since protests erupted last week. Independent observers, such as human rights activists, have faced threats, intimidation, and arrest in Iran. Text messages sent to the public by the government warn that participation in the demonstrations could result in criminal charges. At least 18 journalists have been arrested in the crackdown so far, according to the Committee to Protect Journalists. Like other rounds of unrest since 2009, the latest demonstrations appear to be spontaneous and leaderless. Iran's main reformist political party has called for an end to the mandatory Islamic dress code that has been imposed on women since 1983. The Islamic Iranian People's Party coalition called on authorities to disband the morality police that is responsible for enforcing the dress code, and called on authorities to repeal the mandatory hijab law. The Islamic Iranian People's Party coalition is a legal party, but it is excluded from state power. The party says that an independent commission should be formed to investigate Amini's death. The party urges the immediate release of those recently detained and for the freedom of people to demonstrate peacefully. As Amini's death reignites pent-up resentment over a variety of issues, Iran's hardline leadership is under increasing pressure. The talks to resume the 2015 nuclear deal have stalled. The pandemic and sanctions have left the country's already sluggish economy in further distress, and ordinary Iranians are struggling to cope with soaring inflation. But analysts believe that the government may resort to the same heavy-handed tactics that it has used in the past to curb protests. There are signs that a brutal crackdown is coming. Meanwhile, authorities have imposed the most restrictive level of internet restrictions since 2019. Iranian authorities have taken steps to disrupt the mobile internet in order to restrict protesters from organizing and sharing their videos with the outside world. Access to social media and some content is severely restricted. Internet monitoring group NetBlocks reported an almost complete disruption of internet connectivity in the Kurdish regional capital on Monday. The U.S. announced sanctions against the heads of several law enforcement agencies in the country last Thursday. Along with the sanctions, the U.S. also updated the expansion of internet services available to Iranians. Elon Musk then tweeted on Friday that he would activate Starlink for Iranians to work with the U.S. government in order to facilitate access to free information for Iranians. Musk previously offered the service to Ukrainians to help fight during the Russian invasion. The Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, is using fake accounts to disseminate targeted disinformation in an attempt to interfere with the U.S. midterm elections. Meta, Facebook's parent company, reported on Tuesday, September 27th, that they discovered 2 such accounts and shut them down. Meta found that since November of 2021, these fake Chinese accounts have been posting views in different states posing as liberal and conservative Americans or lurking in the comments of public figures' posts. In fact, the CCP has been doing this for a long time. Only now has Meta decided to go public with this information. Perhaps it's also an attempt to clear its name in the 2020 election. Meta's head of global threat intelligence, Ben Nemo, said at a news conference that this new cyber operation focuses on divisive topics in the U.S. They pretend to be Americans, and they talk about divisive domestic issues such as abortion and gun control. The CCP is hoping that the United States will continue on the wrong path and that the U.S. will eventually collapse. However, the CCP may not have expected that the CCP would collapse much faster than the U.S. and that the CCP would have reached the point of no return. Sebastian Mallaby, a senior fellow for international economics at the Council on Foreign Relations, argued in a September 24th article in the Washington Post that the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, is beginning to collapse. He discusses 4 aspects of the challenges. They include the pandemic prevention and control, the real estate crisis, the crackdown on technology giants, and China's demographic problems. He said that the CCP centralized economic model is coming to an end. Mallaby says that China's weakness is increasingly dominant compared to its strengths. The article cites the Communist Party's recent developments in areas such as drones, mobile payments, 5G network devices, and artificial intelligence. China's economic growth is expected to be slightly more than 3% this year, he said. That's compared with an annual growth rate of about 8% a decade ago. The real reason is that an authoritarian system is reaching its limits. The first obstacle that the CCP has encountered is COVID-19. The CCP will impose a draconian lockdown on any place in China that shows signs of an outbreak. Shanghai, Shenzhen, and dozens of other cities have suffered economically from suicidal and devastating blockades. The blockades disrupted global supply chains, led to the closure of countless small and medium-sized private businesses, and caused food shortages and other hardships for millions of people. The second obstacle facing the CCP is the real estate issue. In the first decade of this century, the CCP manipulated the exchange rate, which boosted exports, but it also led to an unsustainable trade surplus. Then the CCP ordered banks and local governments to promote the rise of the construction industry. The resulting distorted state policies promoted unhealthy growth in the real estate market. While again promoting growth, the CCP replaced unsustainable foreign bond purchases with unsustainable domestic debt. Now, Chinese real estate developers are defaulting on their debts. Home prices have fallen for 12 consecutive months. Since real estate drives more than a quarter of the economy, a collapse in the sector is bound to lead to a broader recession in China's economy. The third obstacle is the impossibility of real growth in the CCP's power in the technology sector. For political reasons, the CCP cannot tolerate tech titans who aspire to become Elon Musk-style influencers. This won't encourage the next generation of technologists to start companies in China. The fourth obstacle is China's demographics. In 1979, the Communist Party leaders implemented a draconian one-child policy that led to a rapid decline in fertility. When the government recognized that it was already facing a demographic crisis, it shifted to a two-child policy. In 2016, this means that a family is encouraged to have 2 children. Last year, in a panic, the government began encouraging families to have 3 children, but it was too late, and the fertility rate showed no sign of rebounding. China's workforce is aging rapidly. Demographic changes are leading to higher pension costs and lower economic growth. Because of demographic issues, China's economy is in danger of not surpassing the size of the United States ever. Mallaby concluded his article on Twitter by saying that the CCP's centralized economic model is coming to an end. The International Society for Heart and Lung Transplantation recently issued a statement banning the acceptance of any organ transplant research papers from China. For years, international human rights organizations and the U.S. State Department's annual human rights reports have pointed to the Chinese Communist regime's systematic forced live organ harvesting of detained Falun Gong practitioners, of ethnic minorities, and other prisoners of conscience. An investigative report was published in 2006 and 2007 by Canadian human rights lawyer David Matas and the late David Kilgour, who was a former Canadian cabinet minister and a longtime MP and a prominent human rights defender. In the book titled Bloody Harvest, they collected more than 40 pieces of evidence and testimonies about the Chinese Communist regime's crime of forced live organ harvesting against illegally imprisoned Falun Gong practitioners. In the face of international accusations and mounting pressure, the CCP regime claimed in 2015 that it had reformed its organ transplant system and that they adopted the practice of voluntary organ donation. But not everyone bought this story. The International Society for Heart and Lung Transplantation was the first medical institution to take a stand on this. The statement said, "In light of the overwhelming evidence that the government of the People's Republic of China alone continues to systematically support the harvesting of organs or tissues from executed prisoners, transplant-related papers involving organs or tissues from human donors in the People's Republic of China will not be accepted by the International Society for Heart and Lung Transplantation." The new policy is based on the 2020 Independent Tribunal into Forced Organ Harvesting from Prisoners of Conscience in China, the China Tribunal decision. Professor Jacob Levy, who is a member of the International Society for Heart and Lung Transplantation Ethics Committee, told the Epoch Times the new policy is in effect a total academic boycott of any transplant-related clinical research from China. Ethan Gutman, the author of The Slaughter, and who is a China Studies Fellow at the Memorial Foundation for Victims of Communism, told the Epoch Times on September 19th, "Until now, Beijing's advocacy of transplant reform has been endorsed by the medical leadership of the Transplantation Society, the World Health Organization, and the Pontifical Academy of Sciences in Vatican City. This institutional stance was not just a break on U.S. political action against Chinese organ harvesting. For the CCP, it was a license to kill. Yet the International Society for Heart and Lung Transplantation has just fired a shot and will be surely to be heard around the world." Levy added, "Several international societies have had similar policies in the past, but these were removed in 2015 after China announced its so-called transplant reforms." Mattis said, "The International Society for Heart and Lung Transplantation statement is significant because it comes from a professional transplant association. It provides the leverage to end transplant abuse in China," he said. He added, "There are many national and international transplant associations and journals. They all need to adopt similar policies." Okay, thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you heard today, please don't forget to like and share this video with your friends and family, because everybody deserves to know the truth. Again, thank you for watching Front Page, and we will see you next time.